sale of, quote, spirituous liquor. And it was an interesting vote. 25 people said no. 7 people said yes. There was 175 residents at the time. So 32 voted of the 175, but the vote didn't pass. The following year, the same question was raised, and the vote was very similar. 25 again said no. This time there was 10 that said yes. They gained 3. But still it was a no. So Wayzata has voted itself as a dry community. Now, to just add a little piece more to that is that this was not uncommon at this point in time. A lot of the early settlers came from the east, and there was a lot of temperance societies, and a lot of the residents didn't believe in alcohol. And in fact, one of the leaders of Wayzata, one of my favorite early guys, Miles Dickey, was rather appalled when he got to Wayzata and saw a community of 3.5 or 4 blocks long that had 14 saloons or bars along its 4 blocks. He was not very happy about that. So this was not an unusual thing for communities to be voted dry. The other thing that's interesting about that timing is that 1884 and 85 is kind of the peak of our glory years. And for those of you, again, that have been here for a lot of our programs, you know that the glory years was that 10 or 12 years in which Lake Minnetonka was a resort destination. So think about the fact that here we are, a resort destination. People are flocking to come here. 18 to 20 trains a day are dropping people off here in Wayzata, but yet we're not allowing any alcohol to be sold. So it's kind of an interesting thing. And one of the kind of fun stories that involves the Lafayette Hotel was that for the celebration of the opening of the hotel, James J. Hill had ordered cases of wine and champagne that he wasn't allowed to open because it was dry. So just so you realize that this wasn't such an unusual thing to have this vote go as it did. Well, a quick little stray away from Wayzata and to look at the bigger, more national picture. So besides 1920 being the start of the Roaring 20s, we also know the other thing about 1920 was Prohibition, right? So in 1917, an amendment is proposed to the Constitution in which they are considering not allowing, across the United States, not allowing the manufacture, the sale, or the transportation of intoxicating liquor. Now, another name that's associated with Prohibition is the Volstead Act. So Congressman, House Representative Andrew Volstead is the name associated, of course, with the Volstead Act. And what he did was he actually defined what intoxicating liquor is. And so what he said was liquor, hard liquor, such as scotch, vodka, gin, wine, and beer are all intoxicating liquors. So that means all of them are going to be included in this movement of prohibition. So that's kind of a little bit of background behind the start of Prohibition. The amendment is proposed in 1917. It's ratified in 1919. And what that means for something to be ratified is there had to be a 3/4 vote in favor of it of all the voting bodies. So in this case, it's the United States. So there's 48 states that voted, and 46 of them voted in favor of Prohibition. 2 didn't, Connecticut and Rhode Island. So this is not Wayzata or Excelsior or Mound, just so we're clear. This is not local pictures, but they were pictures I found that I thought were very fun to kind of just finish the story in the case that last call, nationwide, midnight, January 16th, 1920. Prohibition starts 12:01 in the morning, okay? So people are flocking to the bars and the restaurants and the saloons and the liquor stores. Now, an interesting thing about Prohibition is it said you couldn't manufacture, you couldn't sell, and you couldn't transport. But guess what? You could consume, as long as you did it at home. So people flocked to the liquor stores for last call because they could go ahead and still drink at home, right? You know, just kind of interesting, right? So anyways, Prohibition ends December 5th of 1933. So in looking through city council minutes for Wayzata, I come across a couple things in 1933. Prohibition's not quite ended yet at this point in time, but what the minutes say is that the Wayzata City Council has issued some 3-2 beer licenses to the following establishments. First one is Hart's Cafe, which is the picture on the upper left, which of course is a restaurant that most of you probably in this room recognize and are familiar with. They issued a license to the Bayview Cafe, which was located in the building that's in the upper right. And I'm going to make that a little bit bigger, and you may not be able to read the sign, but inside that sign it says Bayview Cafe. The picture on the lower left is Pettit and Kaiser Grocery. The ad to the left is Hagberg IGA Grocery. And the picture in the lower right is the, quote, old drugstore, which was at this time owned by Jerry Manning. And I'm going to make that picture bigger also, because notice the signs. There's a vertical sign that says drugs. Right below it, there's a horizontal sign that says Hallgren's Ice Cream. And look what the sign below it says, liquor. Right? So that's 1933. Then the next thing that's noted in the minutes is in 1937. There's both some off-sale and some on-sale licenses. Again, Wayzata Pharmacy that we just looked at. Community Drug is open, so that's also getting a license. There's a store called the Wayzata Liquor Store owned by Warren Hewitt. And I spent hours trying to find out more about this because I had never heard of this business, nor had anybody else that I talked to. I talked to all my friends at the other historical societies. Pretty much everybody failed me with that fact that none of us knew who this person was, nor could I find a picture of it. So that's why there's just a name and no photo, because I have not yet found, notice I say not yet, because it's going to come, but I have not yet found a picture of Wayzata Liquor Store that I know assuredly is it. And then Wayzata American Legion and Wood Hill Country Club also were issued licenses that year. Well, now we're going to jump ahead to 1945. So in 1945, a question is proposed to the residents of Wayzata. And this is an article from the Minnetonka Herald that came out on November 22nd, and I put in quote marks because it's so small you can't read the article very well. But the question posed is going to be, shall the city of Wayzata establish and operate a municipal off-sale liquor store? And one of the other things that they say in this article is, and again it's in quote marks, if the city is to continue to render the services it has been giving in the past, it will be necessary to either substantially increase the tax levy or find another source of revenue. And then they also say the municipally owned liquor store is advanced as a possibility for that added source of revenue. So here's the first initial thoughts coming for the thought of a municipal establishment. Well, it goes to vote the next week on December 4th. And it was turned down 171 to 106. And the article in the paper, there's the headline for it. The rest of the article I didn't include because it was about all of the officers elected across the various communities. And the only piece in it was the first little paragraph. And you can see there the proposal was rejected by a vote of 171 to 106. So it did not pass in 1945. Well, now it's 1947. In January of that year, there's a meeting held at Hart's Cafe. Local businessmen, the firemen from our fire department, some of the fire men involved with the Minnesota State Fire Prevention Association are there. The meeting is run by Mr. DeWard, who is the fire department engineer of the state association. And basically what he says at that meeting is that, Wayzata, you have some amazing properties on the lake. They're rather expensive. And, quote, we don't feel that the city of Wayzata has kept up pace with community growth and is not able to provide adequate facilities for housing the fire department. So hold that thought because we're going to grow on that a little bit. So you might be saying, well, where was the fire department located? It was located in the back of City Hall at this time. City Hall was built in 1904. A beautiful building with the beautiful columns in the front and the arched doorway on the left was the library, which was the first permanent home for the library. The arched door on the right was the post office, also its first permanent home. The door in the middle, kind of behind the column a little bit, took you into City Hall. The upstairs was an open space that the community could rent out for large community events, used very frequently by the American Legion and the Masonic Lodge. And in the back was the fire department. Previous to the fire department being there, it was the jail. And the jail actually moved out in 1935, and then the fire department was located there. And also, city works or public works or city maintenance, whatever you want to call it, was also located there. And then you can also see behind it, the kind of scaffolding structure is actually the fire alarm, the bell that is rung when there's a fire to call the firemen.